Real life.
Superpowers.
It's more about having a blanket that's too short and like covering yourself with it anyway. It's more about and we've seen that, and I think we just kind of forgot how it matters. Founders that somehow convince the entire company to stay on, even though they can only pay them minimum wage, promising your client that they'll to stay on and you'll develop that one feature, and promising your R&D to keep working because that client's not going to leave, and somehow just stitching it together and making things work.
Welcome to the Real Life Superpowers podcast. I'm Noah Eshed, here with my co-host Ronen Menipaz. Today, we're pleased to introduce Liron Azrielant. She's a founding managing partner at Meron Capital, a VC at the forefront of investing in technology companies in Israel. Her track record speaks volumes as she's led investments in tech successes such as Loom Systems, Clear Genetics, Testim, and many others which were subsequently acquired. Prior to founding Meron, she was a principal at Blumberg Capital, where she led early-stage deals that also turned into successful exits. Before her venture capital career, she honed her skills as a strategy and M&A consultant at top-tier firms like Bain Co and PwC's PE Group in New York. She's also a fellow of the Kauffman Fellowship, a highly sought-after 2-year program for leading venture capitalists. Her list of accolades is long. Let's delve into the life and experiences of this superwoman.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
It's alive.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Liron, welcome to Real Life Superpowers.
Hello, nice to be here.
Hey, Liron.
Where are you these days?
I'm in my office after a long time away from it.
What were you away in conferences, or what's keeping you away?
Well, after October 7th, it's been hard to come to the office every day. Also, we don't have a safe room here, so we had to. I think we need to run for like a good minute to get to the closest place. So we were working from home for a while, but we've been back to the office for 2 weeks now.
A question that keeps coming up in my mind with respect to things that we're going through these days in Israel and entrepreneurship, I'm always curious how much an entrepreneurial path of life is helping the entrepreneurs in these days, and I'm putting you in that bucket as an investor as well, because if there's something we understand is that the best investors are also with the entrepreneurial spirit and the part of the team. So I'm wondering, how much do you feel that the roller coaster of entrepreneurship has mentally prepared you for this reality?
Oof. It's a tough question because it's easy to say yes because, you don't know if you'll have a job in a month. So, feels like it would kind of prepare you for war, like not knowing how safe you'll be in a month. But I think routine is really helpful. And I think a lot of people just had to come back to work or had this like wheel of routine that doesn't stop or that had to keep going after a while. I think it was a good home base for them. And I think for us, after the initial shock, there was that other part that all the partners, we kind of define our priorities, we define what's next, we define what's important. And after the initial shock, there was this new hurdle of you need to recreate your routine, you need to recreate how you respond, and it becomes this question that's a little too open-ended instead of just doing something. So I had to start with something else. I had to start with, okay, I'm just going to work out every day, because I had to start with like a personal routine to even get into the mindset of rebuilding my professional routine.
Let's talk about the routine for a second, because like as an entrepreneur, I'm feeling that the past few years are let's call them bizarre, okay? And the amount of changes about like the word routine. So let's say if I take like 2019, 20-ish, we had this Corona thing, and then we had this inflation thing, and then we had specifically in Israel this war thing, and I'm wondering about the routine things. Like, do you feel that like what changes were made, okay, like in cultures, in working, like I grew up in a sense that I don't know what working in home is. You know what I mean? Like that was nothing. There was nothing of working at home. I didn't understand the concept. And like, what are those main changes? And how does that bother you? Like, how do you maintain a routine where it's already allowed to be at home and whatever?
Hard to answer that, honestly. I think there's kind of two. There's the strategic part and there's the tactical part. So strategically, I think the problem started even earlier. So if you ask me, the real anomaly isn't that there's a recession or maybe even just talks about a recession now. It's more that everything was just going up and up and up without a recession or without a correction for 12, 13 years before it. So I feel like as an entrepreneur, you kind of only knew this one playbook, this raise the most money I can, spend the most money I can, hire the best people, even if they're the most expensive that I can, and boom, an amazing company appears almost. And yeah, that works in growing markets, in good times. That actually works more often than it doesn't work. And just being extremely optimistic and not even knowing that there used to be bad times really works in good economies. And there's this generation that I guess I'm to some extent a part of it. I was only starting to be part of the workforce in 2008, so I only have vague memories of it. I remember I got accepted to a master degree. So all I remember is there were a lot of talks about layoffs in the company. I woke up to the HR woman and I tell her, hey, do you want to fire me? Like, would it help? Would it save some? Because I already knew I was going to quit and go to school. And well, yeah, it didn't help her. I wasn't saving any other person's job, so I had to quit instead of getting fired. But, or getting laid off, I guess. But yeah, like I didn't actually full-blown experience a market downturn until now. So I think the common denominator in everything that's happened since 2019 is that people had to write a new playbook and also just kind of scratch it after, because what seemed to work in 2019, honestly, that just followed by 2020 and 2021. And that was a crazy market rally. So a lot of what worked before continued to work after, but now we're getting into more challenging times.
So what works now?
I think what always works, or what's always important, but probably didn't get as much credit in the previous years, is resilience. It's more about having a blanket that's too short and like covering yourself with it anyway. It's more about, and we've seen that, and I think we just kind of forgot how it matters. Founders that somehow convinced the entire company to stay on, even though they can only pay them minimum wage, promising your client that to stay on, and you'll develop that one feature, and promising your R&D to keep working because that client's not going to leave, and somehow just stitching it together and making things work, and just like keep going. Waking up not knowing if you're going to have to give notice to your employees next week, and still doing the best you can, and surviving, or just fighting another day. And I think the times where money was so cheap got these practices into the market that's like, oh, if you have 12 months of runway, 18 months of runway, you have to fundraise now, which, yeah, that's better if you can, but you should also not lose the muscle of still surviving if you can't.
Right, but Meron, like as an investor, right? How do you measure resilience? Like when you meet these entrepreneurs, how do you measure it? Like that, that they're resilient.
The short answer is we don't know for sure. We always like investing in founders that we know for a longer time. Our best deals are founders that we met much, much earlier. We met a year before they started fundraising. We knew them a long time before. We saw how they work somewhere else. We worked with them through two ideas that actually weren't that great, and they end up changing ideas until they do find something they want to work with. So sometimes only if we're fortunate enough to do the long process with them, we actually know. Oftentimes, before we gain conviction, those founders get a term sheet from someone else, or we see that they really need to get going, and we have to decide with incomplete information. We try our best. A lot of the due diligence process isn't really about the answers that the founders give us as we talk. It's not really about knowing the right answer initially. It's more about the discussion. So, how are you going to price it? And let's say they give me the right answer immediately. Sure, that's nice, but that's not that interesting. It's more interesting how they respond when I challenge that, how they respond when they get information that makes their answer to not make as much sense anymore. So it's a little bit through that process that hopefully you get a peek into it, but unfortunately, it's really hard to tell. We do have some red flags that we try noticing too, and our I guess our most common reason to reject founders or reject teams, especially in the hype years, where these guys think it's going to be too easy. Every time we dig deep, we ask questions, and we get this feeling of, if we build it, they will come. Or how do you succeed? You raise money, you raise more money, you sell the company. Or which was kind of true back then, but you still want people who are prepared for a longer path if they need to take it. So yeah, we rejected a lot of top teams when we had suspicions around that.
So you're saying something interesting. So there's entrepreneurs on the long run that failed or had bad ideas or didn't have successes. And in the third time, when it counted, that you already understood, though, you had a relationship with them, you liked them, you trusted them, you knew they tried hard, which is interesting because usually people don't like to come with failures again and again, right? So you're actually taking out those failures. Can you give us like an example of someone who I'll call it surprise, but didn't surprise you, like came from failure to success, and like you guys identified it?
Yeah. And sometimes, by the way, it's not even an actual failure. So you know how investors really like saying, there's no such thing as too early. Come to me even when it's too early. That's not always true, because if you come to the investor and you make a really bad impression, that impression stays. So a lot of times we try to overcome that. We try to really focus on not just, this guy came to us with the worst idea. It's more about what he did when faced with the problems of his idea. And I guess the best answer is the latest investment we've done. It's a company called Hopper. So Hopper, the CEO is Roy Gottlieb. I actually know him from, I think, 2015. He was an investor back then. And the one personality trait that stands the most with Roy Gottlieb is that he will either succeed or die. And he's also impossible to kill. So it's just this person that resilience is dripping off him. He would go without a salary if he had to. He would work 10 days consecutively to the point of sometimes we need to balance him out a little, but he's just so resilient. So I feel like we've had that check even from the second he said he was an investor before. From the second he said, I'm done being an investor, I'm going to start my own company. So we knew he was our type of founder from day one. We followed him through, he had a different founder back then. He had, by the way, he had an idea that we liked. We thought that idea was good enough. And he said, it's a good, not great idea. And he really insisted on doing diligence. And the first founder, he was sort of like taking a few steps with, once again, good match, not a great match. And then he found this guy that, he found Liron, his co-founder, that as soon as we saw them together, we were like, wow, like really complementary to each other. Roy's a very dominant person, so you'd think whoever comes with him would be not as dominant, but Liron, like they really bring out the best from each other. And it was just a really good match. And honestly, with him, it was by the time that all these things clicked, it was just so obvious that we wanted to invest in him. It was just a question of how much and what size of a round. And to be fair, it was also our biggest check up to that date.
And you're describing him and, switching sides and becoming from an investor an entrepreneur. Does that ever appeal to you? Was there any stage in your journey where you thought that you want to do your own thing and set up your own company? And I'm asking this both from a perspective of somebody who came back from New York and started investing yourself, but also these days.
Yeah. I'm going to quote another founder of ours that I really, really like, and that's Oded Zavi, the founder of Mesh, CEO and founder of Mesh. He says, wanting to be a founder, or wanting to be a startup is like wanting to be a celebrity. It doesn't make sense in a vacuum. You should want to play the piano really, really well, and hopefully you'll become famous in it. You should want to be a singer. You should want to be a politician. Just wanting to be famous is, sure, I guess Kim Kardashian's that, but it's a little bit of the wrong, looking at it from the wrong side.
Why is it different than wanting to be an investor?
An investor is a profession. It's a trade. There's something, and wanting to be a founder is a great motivation. It's just incomplete. It's just, okay, so you want to start something. What are you excited about? What do you want to start? And in Oded's case, his answer to it is, I wanted to bring something to I wanted to work in payments. I wanted to find a better way to manage money, to manage money transfers. And the best way that I can do that now is by starting Mesh Payments.
So Liron, what you're trying to say is like, if you want to be a founder, it's sort of like an art of creation, whereas being an investor is a profession of diligence and professional like methods and like calculated methods.
That's part of it, but I guess what I'm saying is, being a founder is the how, and what you do, what you found, what is the what. So if you are the most excited about solving a certain problem, ideally, you should be excited about that problem. And if the best way that you can solve that problem is by being a founder, that's amazing. You're a founder. It's a more complete motivation.
Can I challenge that? Do you mind if I challenge that? Because there's also a founder for your company. There's also a founder, right? Which probably has the same kind of challenge, right?
At a certain point, the best way for me to move forward with being an investor, I was working at Blumberg Capital. Then I started Meron Capital at first as a single LP, but then as a multi. So yeah, at a certain point, the best way forward for me to be an investor in the way that I wanted to be an investor was to found something new.
What investor did you want to be, and why did you want to be an investor? Let's go back there.
I think being an investor isn't something, so unlike being a lawyer, being a doctor, most professions, it's not something you study in the university. So it's very much an apprenticeship business. Most investors behave somewhat similarly to the people they grew up working with. And I think this makes learning how to be an investor very complicated. I think what's unique in myself and Danny, Meron Capital, now it's myself, Danny, and Gil, we're a 3-partner firm now, is that a lot of what we learned ourselves. So we did start with Blumberg Capital. We learned a lot from Alon Lifshitz that we still very much appreciate. But most of our career was within Meron Capital. So we're very much investors that have a founder mindset. And we're very much not in the sense there's a lot of investors that used to be founders. I think who we are is investors who are still founders. We're still building our company. We're still thinking how we position ourselves, how we strengthen the brand, how we grow up, how we get to the next level. And I think that comes in a lot of how we invest and how we work with founders.
But what led you to want to become an investor in the first place? What led to this career path? What about this was appealing? Yeah.
Wow. I don't know that I know to this day. I just know that I like what I'm doing and like it works so far. Maybe it ties a little back with what I said about a desire to be a founder is an incomplete desire, that you need to be excited about something. And I think I kind of never found that one thing. So a lot of my roles ended up being very broad roles. So I started out actually wanting to be into computer science. So I got a master's in computer science, but I combined it with an MBA. I thought I was going to be a developers manager or a CTO somewhere. That was my original thinking. But I ended up focusing more on the MBA part, on the business school, and I ended up becoming a management consultant after, which is probably the broadest role you could think of.
But you didn't end up, because you are self-aware and calculated. So let's zoom in on that. Why did you end up not being a CTO or any of those other options and going down that road?
Yeah, I'm sure. As a woman with computer science, you get multiple offers. After having an MBA, after working.
This was a choice.
I'm sure.
Wow, not sure I can answer. So first of all, so I got my master's in computer science after a bachelor in math. I'm sorry, this might sound a bit but I wasn't that good in computer science. Math is completely theoretical, and computer science specifically at MIT, it's like the joke on these MIT grads is that they don't know how to code. Most of my training was just very theoretical. So I don't, in terms of offers, in terms of where I was, I have to tell you, I didn't feel like I was being pulled into that direction all that strongly. But maybe that's a bit of a cop-out.
Is it because maybe like, is it because of the tangibles? Because it's a feeling that I have. Because like something about you seeing the business, like it's not virtual. It's like there's people, there's a company, and the due diligence and analytic features that you have, like were felt like more at home. You know what I mean? Like, did you feel more at home about like the business side of it than anything else?
Now I do. Now I definitely do. But back then, I don't think that what it was. I think, in all honesty, it might just be that I ended up there. In terms of, so management consulting, if after 2 years of business school, you still don't know what you want to do when you grow up, you go to be a management consultant. That's just another 2 years of business school. And at the point where I was when I graduated, that's exactly what I wanted. It was like, 2 more years of this, not having to commit to one career path and getting paid for it and getting the social validation of being like doing one of the top careers. The smartest graduates went to be a consultant. So it seemed to make sense. And also I had this thought that, okay, so you get a taste of each industry. I'll definitely find my industry if I get a taste of, and you know what I learned after 2 years of getting a taste of each industry? That I kind of like getting a taste of each industry. So that was really a random turn of events, but they tell you, pick New York and San Francisco, but also everybody picked New York and San Francisco, so pick another thing. So I picked Atlanta. I had an internship in Atlanta. I felt like it was a cheap place to live, nice weather. I was like, yeah, okay, Atlanta. I ended up getting Atlanta. So, and at Bain Company, private equity is the biggest hub in Atlanta. So I ended up doing a lot of private equity deals at Bain in Atlanta. And that's sort of how I first learned of the world of PE back then. And it's a very bird's eye view. It's like, we want to buy this computer company. We want to buy this staffing firm for doctors, things you didn't, this tire company, things you didn't even know were businesses. And suddenly you're learning about them. And yeah, that part was fun. And I can tell you that honestly, I do kind of regret not going deep into anything. My sister, she's a doctor and she's a researcher in psoriasis. And I see how she does. And it's like she's using her brain a lot more. She's more on. And I miss that. Being so bird's eye is a little is to some extent a very superficial job. A lot of what I do is just taking things I see and putting them into boxes. But I also like doing it. So I'm not sure. Like,
what kind of a house did you grow up in? Are your parents entrepreneurs, or what was the profile?
So my dad, how do I define my dad? My dad's a businessman. Now, today, he's a divorce lawyer. Before that, he had a business for sort of like reconciliation, gishur. I'm not even sure what's the word in mediation. And before that, he had a business of jewelry, a jewelry company in Israel. So my dad actually got his law degree at 40. So he had a lot of career path. And my mom is a lawyer too. She's traffic law, and they're both very alpha. They're both working really hard. My dad, he's over 70, and he still works as if he's just in the middle of his career, and he still gets excited about expanding his business, growing more. And I guess my two siblings are also pretty alpha. Not sure what how to frame that as a house, but we all loved each other. Maybe we were a little too competitive at times, but mostly in a good way.
It sounds like a career-oriented house. There, like career was important.
Yeah, like I guess my brother, he's one of the two founders of Axis Security, which was one of the biggest cyber exits of the year.
So the competition was tough. So when you got to MIT, that was like a big thing probably.
Yeah, like I said, I think we're always to some extent but mostly in a good way, mostly in a way that it got us to want to be better, and but also we kind of work with each other. I when my brother was younger, I was trying to help him out. Now I don't. There's not like a cyber deal I do without asking his opinion. He also invested in Hopper, the company that I just mentioned. So it's I guess when we were teenagers, it was different, but now it's more like we're friends, I guess.
We're excited to be collaborating with the Israeli website CTech, owned by Calcalist, Israel's leading business newspaper. CTech is the gateway of the Israeli high-tech to the tech world and vice versa. If you're not already a regular reader, we strongly recommend that you check out calcalistech.com, CALCALISTECH.com, to stay up to date on all high-impact stories from the Israeli tech scene.
When you're going out in this house that's career oriented, right? So usually the stories of non-entrepreneurs or they go study what the parents do, right? So what was the decision to go offbeat on that?
I think I always wanted to be a not lawyer, or not a lawyer.
Is that something that did they encourage you to become a lawyer, or because we see that also, there's the parents that tell you go run as far as you can from what I'm doing, or continue my path. That's the way you should go.
Yeah, I don't think they encouraged me to be a lawyer that much. I think also in Israel it was considered one of the top jobs when it lost some of its prestige in the years that I was growing up. So maybe that also played into it. I think they always encouraged us to be very, very analytical, probably more analytical than we wanted. It didn't seem to, it didn't, some of us were also kind of creative, but that never mattered as much. But yeah, not, there is just this general push towards career in general. It didn't really matter. It's the funny thing is, if you ask my mom to this day what I do, she would still say something in high tech. I don't think she fully understands what being an investor is. She just knows it's something good.
But that is you pulling away to a creative, because what you're doing today is even going to if you see a lot of businesses, some of the idea is what your added value is that you take a little bit, cherry pick from all the things and you combine them, and you're actually finding the synergy and analyzing what will work, and probably a lot of joint ventures and partnerships between those things and networking, which is very creative. So you actually ran to the creative side.
Yeah, and a lot of call it poor man's psychology. It's I remember, I know after my first 10,000 hours in this job, I remember noticing that I can see relationships in terms of I could tell which couple's going to break up. just from having that skill of seeing how founders, like which founders work and which founders don't work. Yeah, like it ends up, my math training tends to be the least important.
So how do you know if a partner's good or not, or a couple's not good? Give us like the three they're going to break up.
So at this point, it's intuition, but I'm going to try and break it down just to kind of explain what we're in tune to. So for example, some things are structural. If you ask what people roles are in the team and two roles really overlap with each other, then you know there's a risk. You know they're going to have to make a huge effort not to step on each other's toes, and hopefully they'll succeed, but they're putting themselves in a difficult situation to begin with. Then there's the more social cues. For example, if the presentation is too rehearsed, like if they don't cut each other off at all, we know that they cut each other off and they realized it and they trained, and they proactively decided, this is my part, this is not my part. For example, when myself and when us three partners present something, we never say, oh, you present this thing, you present that thing. We just talk, and if we cut each other off, it's like, oh, sure, you go. Like it's fine. If it feels too staged, there's probably an issue. If it's you wouldn't believe it, but sometimes you can see people get mad. Like it's minor, but it's there in the actual presentation. And it's like, it's 45 minutes, just keep it in, but they don't. They never do.
So you're actually looking for like ego and authenticity. Like those are like the two, like your intuition is looking for ego and authenticity. And by that, knowing where it's going to go.
Ego, authenticity, and sometimes just chemistry between them. Sometimes, two people could have huge egos and it would work. I think potentially, like people I work with have, as well as myself, like have two egos that if you look at it in a vacuum, it's not expected to work, but somehow we make it work.
So that comes back to the longer relationship. So when you have a longer relationship, you can actually, see that authenticity and ego working with people, and it makes it much easier to understand if you'll work well with a team and everything else, right? Is that?
Yes. And it ties back to resilience as well, because people who are strong and people who are resilient also, even if they have a huge ego, even if they have huge emotions, by the way, which is also another axis of that, they find ways to make things work. They find structures. They find, so they realize they have a giant ego. They find the words. They find like something like, okay, I need a day, and then they like yell at the pillow or something, or they find the crutches they need to go past the crises instead of just like slamming into them.
Did you always have that, or is it a skill set that you built?
Definitely not always, but I can tell you with my partner, like Danny and I have been working together for 7 years now. We have a language. We have we could, we could really passionately argue with each other, and it's going to be like a normal argument. Like, is Elon Musk a supervillain? That's something we love arguing about. He is, by the way.
Yeah, these days it's clear.
Yeah, or it'll be like, and we annoy each other, and it'll be fine. But then one of us gets like really annoyed, and it'll be like, okay, not now, and that's like our signal to break. And I have that with my husband. All meaningful relationships I have those like sign language that we know to sort of like guard the relationship, to climb down from the tree. And I think like it's a trait for like strong and maybe self-aware people have.
Do you think that maybe you landing where you are, which I still don't believe is coincidental in any way, is you took an analytical path, but you were sort of pulled, probably internally, I would say, towards a more of a people's path. And do you feel that you're more left brain or right brain?
I think I was originally very, very, I forgot which one's which.
The right is the creative.
Analytical, that's right brain, right?
The analytical, I think, is the left.
Oh, because it's, yeah, okay. I think I was born 100% more analytical. I think I always took an interest in the more creative and the more people-prone side, even though I sucked at it.
Why do you say that you sucked at it?
Naturally, because I did. I don't think I grew up with like very developed social skills, like younger. I remember wanting people to like me or not understanding how other people are feeling, or even I had my girlfriends were like mad at me. I was like, oh, what's wrong? Like I didn't even understand how they were feeling. Like growing up, I don't think I had those skills because I remember not having those skills. And I think I just got my 10,000 hours of it. It's just like you care about this and you observe how people are and you look how like the world responds to you. And I think now I got very good at it. That's just like my personal analysis on myself.
That's really interesting, though, because that's like really extreme. That as a teen, you would look at social situations and not read the cues and not understand them. And then through what you're describing as practice, we're able to develop such skills to an extent that you now identify cues that are not even verbal and are able to predict where a social situation is going to end up. Like there's something here that's very interesting in the arc of what you've been through. Maybe I'm just suggesting it was less about not understanding stuff, but more about silencing other noises and then being more in tune with yourself. Because I find it just really hard to believe or grasp that a person suddenly is able to develop something to that extent, which wasn't there in the first place.
I don't know. Like I think I have friends who, like I have other like late bloomer friends and I think they also felt very similar to me. And I think it's like, I think something very individual. There's this, I think it's part of the book Blink, but maybe it was one of the other. So you know how the firefighters walked into the place, they didn't see anything, they couldn't tell you what they saw, but they felt like they should get out of there. They got out of there and the place collapsed, and then they analyzed what happened, and you realized that the heat was different because it was coming from below, like all sorts of things that they could have actually saw or smelled or felt, but they didn't. All they felt was danger. So I think when you develop skills early, it's like a feeling. It's like he's happy, he's sad, they get along, they don't like it. It's like a feeling, but when you develop them late, it's like a thought. It's like it's kind of we all know how to drive, and we don't really think of how much we turn the wheel. We just turn the wheel, but there was a time that we had to break it down to something. So the way I feel about a lot of the way that I understand social interactions and the way that I see people and understand my friends, I feel like it was um, taught late, and you know, and I think a lot of my friends are also late bloomers in that sense, and it's something that we connect with each other. And I think when you experience that, it's a lot more natural to you to feel it.
Liron, I actually think you're saying something really important and amazing, and I'll explain why. You're saying that, and I agree with you actually. If something comes naturally, okay, and it's intuitive, you don't actually become probably better at it because you have it, and because you felt that you're lacking it, you studied that and did that 10,000 hours and came a skill set. Whereas someone gets the intuition of feeling, I think he's happy because I usually know he's happy. You are knowing, not in a sense knowing his mind, but knowing what it is because you're adding to that logic. And you're putting something that is emotional and logical. And then because of the lacking it's now a skill set and not a characteristic. So you actually got better at something that is that made method of something that is really hard to make tangible, and it's a skill set. So that's the added value to that, which is really interesting.
It's like putting things that are so difficult to identify under a magnifying glass and being able to label them and then take action and build off them. That's fascinating. I'm trying to understand how that goes along with feelings, because what we're discussing is something that is not logical, and yet you're describing it as such, but it seems to be working for you. And you also don't strike as a detached person emotionally.
Yeah, no, it's not like I separate the interface from the CPU. You're not like detached. Like, no, I don't think I ever had a CPU issue. Like, I always wanted my friends to feel happy.
That's the drive of getting better.
But the metaphor is fascinating. Like, she took it so analytically. I separate the interface from the CPU. That's fascinating.
Yeah, although it just proves that anything you can get better at when you put the 10,000 hours to it. Like, it doesn't really, like, that was what's important for her. You know,
no, but
we all
have
lack something and we want to get better at it. But it just means anything that you want, you can get better at it.
Yeah, but even that research talks about deliberate practice. You can practice for 10,000 hours, and that's actually the misconception, because Malcolm Gladwell took that concept of 10,000 hours and he brought it into popular culture. But it was actually Eric Reyes who was I think he's social scientist who was coining it in the first place, and he's talking about deliberate practice, and there's a huge difference. And it's really interesting that you were able to apply that deliberate practice, because it's not enough to just be there and putting the hours and practice. It's about actually being intentional about it and having a learning curve. And you seem to have been very deliberate about this, which requires EQ.
Yeah, honestly, like it's kind of like the difference between playing soccer and teaching soccer, or like.
I get you.
Which is another analogy, which is great, because you're on the investor teaching, mentoring end rather than the playing on your play field, which is also really interesting.
So honestly, a lot of times I find that part really helpful, because I could put words into emotional problems, into a founder comes up to me and he's mad about something, and it's just easier for me to break it down. It's like, what makes you mad? It's because you think that person has influence. Don't worry, he doesn't. So you can, like, there's this sort of a coaching skill set that comes with it, and it's
practical empathy.
Yeah.
What would you say your superpower is?
Maybe that. Like, I have a name for it that makes like it's it maybe has like some bad connotations, but they call it social engineering, and I think that's a little bit of what it is, and it is like bringing the like math and it's more and you know it's more about it's from everything. It's from getting my friend to stop worrying about something she should stop worrying about, to unclustering a board situation that's not going so well. Like I think a lot of times, and especially when it's different people at play, that makes it really difficult to do. And I think I'm pretty good at. I'm even better at the strategy of it all than the tactics. Like a lot of times, I know exactly what needs to be done, but I can't always deliver it. So, and by the way, this is sometimes where me and my partner work really well together, because he's really good at the like getting to people, empathizing with people. So sometimes when we need to help someone, we work together really well on this. But yeah, I do think that's that's a superpower.
And what would you say your weakness is?
Ego. And this is even with being an investor. There is something really frustrating with being the investor, because you stand on the sideline and you cheer, and you need to see someone else running and winning the game. And I find it sometimes hard for me. I find like I need to get over myself to be fine doing it.
How do you do that?
I remind myself that the people that end up being most successful oftentimes have people even more successful next to them. Or I remind myself that if someone in my orbit has like amazing success, what the most helped me is someone's going to be that successful. Don't you prefer it to be this guy than someone you don't know? Or I need to, honestly, I need to work on myself on this. But the reason I say that ego is my weakness is because my go-to is when something good happens, to drag it to how that impacts on myself, and not just be happy, like not go outside myself. It's like, maybe it's more like self-centered than ego, or maybe it's somewhere in between. But it's just work on my side.
Maybe it's the fact that you're able to label it and sort of look within and understand that you're experiencing that emotion in the first place is what's enabling you to deconstruct it and be able to get over it.
Yeah, maybe it's like I do with everything.
By the way, one of your superpowers has to be self-awareness, because you're amazingly self-aware and analyzed, and which is a great superpower, right? And especially where you are. Even saying that weakness itself, the self-awareness of it becomes a problem that you can actually tackle, right? Because it's an intangible.
Yeah, hopefully, although that's been the case for years, so who knows?
By the way, speaking of awareness, I was realizing that I mentioned that Eric Reyes was the 10,000 hour deliberative practice dude, but I'm realizing that Eric Reyes is the one with the lean startup, the MVP approach, and Dr. Anders Ericsson is the one that wrote Peak about 10,000 hours. So that's, sorry, the geek here had to inject that and correct the mistake for it.
I'm happy. I'm really happy.
You were probably
I was stressed about that, yeah.
You're welcome. So, Liron, what do we wish you? Where do you hope to be? What's your next milestone?
Next milestone. It's a very boring milestone because it's not that milestone-y, but I just want to keep doing what I'm doing, but better. It's like we want to work with more and more of Israel's toppest founders. We want to be more competitive on the deals on the people that we want to work. We want to have more successes of the types that we've had before. So yeah, just like, I guess, stay in Meron Capital and just have it keep getting better.
Sounds good. Seems like you're in the direction there.
I hope so.
Liron, thank you so much for your time. It was great. And I wish you the best of luck. And keep coming back to that beautiful office.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a really interesting conversation. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. That's all for today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to our podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, if you have a moment, we would really appreciate it if you could rate and review our podcast on the platform you're listening to. This will help others find our show. And as always, if you know anyone who you think would enjoy our podcast, please share it with them. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back as usual on the 1st of the month.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
It's alive.
Real life.
Superpowers.